All right. Aloha and
Hi,
welcome.
Corey.
Hi, Rusty. Welcome to episode 3 of Radical Love, how a transformation in love, how a revolution rather in love will transform your life. And it's with me, Corey Beadle. And I'm so very pleased on this third podcast to be introducing a really wonderful human being. And let me invite you to energetically give a warm welcome to Rusty Gaillard. Yay!
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And Rusty is, so a little bit of background of who Rusty is. So Rusty has a really cool story that you're going to love. Rusty left, and I'm going to give you this I just want to tell you this bio because it is rich and it's powerful and it's important to have all of these details. Rusty left a 13-year career at Apple in 2019 to focus full-time on helping people transform their life to one that they absolutely love. And his passion for his work comes from his personal experience of transformation. He's been studying transformation for over 10 years, and he walks his talk. He really walks his talk. And part of what we're going to talk about today likely is going to be about this transition from Apple to where you are today, taking these, as you have throughout your life, but these leaps of faith with regard to listening to your intuition. Specifically, in 2010, you decided for a voluntary demotion, as you call it, to spend more time with your young son. Mm-hmm. So that in itself, there's radical love right there for deciding for this within the landscape of the world as it is, and how there is a privileging of status and such, that you decided, no, what's more important to me is spending time with my son and my family, and then experiencing the common language would be the difficulty, the challenge, the rough times of a multi-year divorce, but what we know to call it is a rigorous opportunity or rigorous opportunities, and navigating the landscape of that opportunity. And then launching your new career in 2018 as a amazing transformational coach and motivational speaker. So that's a little bit about my friend Rusty. Hello, how are you?
Hello. Great. I'm so happy to be here, Corey. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for sharing this work with the world.
Oh, thank you, my friend. It's absolutely my pleasure. I'm so honored that you are on our podcast today. So tell me, my friend, when we were talking about radical love, and we were coming from the energy of, what are we going to talk about today? We both had the same insights of talking about, because you are my first man on Radical Love podcast. You're the first man talking about your experiences in terms of navigating not only this amazing, maybe we will call it a leap of faith, with regard to demoting yourself at Apple to spend more time with your son, which in itself we could, and society will often talk about caretakers, and to be a caretaker is generally seen as a feminine trait. And how beautiful it is that you decided for that as a man. And if that's something that you'd like to talk about and share that journey with us.
Yeah, and it really started when my son was born. I took 3 months off of work to be his primary caregiver from age 4 months to 7 months, when he was in that age.
Wow.
And it was the best thing I've ever done. And I so highly recommend it to people to take time off, to men specifically, to take time off, because it is such a bonding experience. And I think so many men assume that moms have this, whether it's an instinct or a nature, just kind of they're drawn to that kind of mothering care of an infant. Right. And an infant needs full care, right? An infant can't do things for themselves.
Yes.
But to be, I still think, so my son is 12 now, and I still think that time that we spent together was so foundational, obviously at a very subconscious level for him, because he doesn't remember any of that from 4 to 7 months.
Right.
but to build that trust that he can fully trust me and that I am fully capable of caring for him. Feeding him, changing his diaper, putting him to sleep, taking him to activities, entertain, spending time with him, talking to him, singing with him, just all the things that we did together. And it was, I just loved it. It was such an amazing time for me. And I still look back at that as foundational. Right. So that's where, when you talk about taking time off to spend time with family, it starts there for me. And just such a magical time.
And so I'm just curious as to if you walk us through when you took this amazing time, and that, which, I think maybe perhaps people just supported that, were at Apple, at your job and your life, were people supportive of that? Did they say that's great?
Not exactly. It turns out it was California state law that you are entitled to take a certain amount of time off. And I took the most time that I could. I maximized the whole thing. Yes. And I was likely one of the first men to do that at Apple.
No.
Maybe not at all of Apple. Apple's a huge company, but at least in the group that I was in, it was pretty unusual. It was very unusual. I didn't know anyone else who had done it.
Radical. Radical.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. You're just a leader, right? A leader. I'm certain, I don't know this for sure. If it hasn't already happened, I'm sure it will, but there are going to be other people in your company, former company, that are now doing that because you helped pave the way.
Yeah.
In other words, that's not, can be like the dude thing, but it's having the radical love for yourself to go, yeah, it doesn't really matter what I'm speculating, but I would think part of the process had to be, it doesn't really matter if my bros don't think this is cool. This is my baby, and I want to spend time with my baby, and I'm going to have radical love for you in this. You have to, I would think, have that radical love for yourself in that moment, meaning it doesn't matter if the external don't agree with it. You knew that, your intuition said, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I will say, at that point in my life, so this was 12 years ago, at that point in my life, that I was not good at what you just described. I was not good at that, like, follow what feels right. I was so influenced by what other people thought. I really was. And so this was a challenge for me. And you talk about leadership and all of that. Like, I didn't feel like I was trying to do something that was paving the way or anything. I was really trying to act on what I thought was a good thing, and felt to me like this can't be a bad decision. And so I want to even go back further, because when I was just out of college, I had a job where I was working with some military people, and I was talking to a guy who had spent more than 20 years in the military. And we were talking, and we were sitting over a beer, and we were talking about life. And he said, I worked hard in the military, and he was successful. He moved up the ranks and had a very good military career. And he said, the only thing that I regret about that is that I worked too hard and I wasn't around for my kids. And this is a military guy, right? So this is like the macho, if you think about places that draw macho people, the military draws macho men. And this is like a strong guy. And he said, it's the one thing that I wish I had done differently. And I remember where I was.
Wow.
I actually remember what it looks like. I remember distinctly that conversation still to this day, more than 20 years ago. And it really had an impact on me. And so that is one of those things that, one of the things we talked about is this idea of, what does radical love look like for a man?
Yes.
And that was just the beginning for me of this taste that men can desire to spend time with their family, and they can value relationship, and they can prioritize that. And so we're talking about bits of that journey for me over time, but I just wanted to go back to the beginning, because that really, I do remember that very formative conversation.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that, there's a lot of things happening there. One, we never know the impact our conversations that we'll have with another for another, and the same for us. I want to just send that person, that man, great love and energy in this moment, because, yeah, hypermasculinity is privileged. It still is in our culture. I think that's changing, but I went to go see, Infinity Wars recently, right? I love this the superhero Marvel, but most of it is privileging of masculinity. Things are changing a bit, but so definitely I think within the context of the military, there's a privileging of hypermasculinity, not just masculinity, but hypermasculinity, which can be really problematic. And in that moment, two souls connecting, he was transparent, and he didn't pretend, which can be a thing for both men and women. I think perhaps maybe even more men, because you got to put up the facade that it's all good, and that's a different conversation in terms of how much men are encouraged to have heartfelt conversations with each other and cry on each other's shoulders. To my knowledge, that's not something that is encouraged as it is with women. But in that moment, he just said, that's my regret. And it stayed with you. It resonated with you. How beautiful and powerful, so that when it came to your own experience, and thank you for again reminding me, like, that was 12 years ago when you did this. We were in, not only you internally, but externally, the world was in a very different place 12 years ago. So right. even in some ways more asleep than we are now when it comes to parenting roles and masculinity and femininity, and you took that brave, bold step and said, I totally get it. You weren't like, I'm going to be a thought leader. I'm going to lead. You just like,
no.
were. But just like that military man was, that way you were too. Not that this is my intention to do this, but rather like this is, and it's like what, I know about with regard to the paradigm, there's a part of us that wants that expansion, and there's a part of us that wants to stay small. But you didn't let that small part, go, no, I won't take the time off. You said, I'm doing this.
Yeah. It was great. And just that tension that you described, I was actually reflecting on it this week, and the tension between the paradigm, the part of me that wants to, part of it is stay small, but the other part of it is look good. And so that's a big paradigm for me. It's been something that's been operative in a lot of my life. And so when I did make that decision in 2010 that you talked about earlier, you mentioned, is the decision to take a lower level job in order to create more balance. That was a huge internal struggle. And I did not do that gracefully. It was messy because there was a part of me that wanted more balance, that wanted more freedom and space and time in my life, and was ready to give some prestige up at work in order to have that. But there was this whole other part of me that valued the prestige and saw tied my self-worth to that. And so that part of me was raging and saying, are you crazy? What are you doing? And in fact, for years afterwards, I didn't like to talk about my work. And so people would ask me what I did, and I would basically shut down the conversation. I'd say, I work at Apple, and I blah, 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 blah. Because I was ashamed of it, because that part of me was still there. It was still active and still saying, how could you have done this?
Yeah. That's the word that was coming to, I was wondering if you were going to say it, and you did. It's shame. It's that terribly seductive, just insidious feeling of shame. There's a lot of research around this. You probably know Dr. Brené Brown, and her work has skyrocketed because people are like, wait, I'm not the only one who feels shame, and it's okay. And it's like coming out of the dark. And the only way I know this myself is for us to move past that shame is to shine the light of awareness on it, more than that, shine the light of love on it. And how powerful, though, that you are cognizant of the fact that I couldn't even talk about it, right? I couldn't talk about the fact that I don't have this position, because as we are taught, for most of us, unless we have some highly evolved, amazing parents who are coming from a different, stratosphere, but we're taught that status matters.
Yeah.
Right? Get the job at Apple. Yes. Get the degree, get the degrees, get the promotion, keep moving up, because this, on the that hierarchical ladder is parallel to how we feel about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if we keep going up, all right, I feel good. If we decide for something lower, I don't, where's my worth? It's just so very conditional and external based, based on external factors. Would you say that since then, I think I know the answer, but would you say since then to now that you have less of a, you're less invested with the external in terms of how you feel about yourself, at least compared to back then?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it is a journey, right? It's not something that happens overnight. The phrase that comes to mind for me is, for so much of my early life, I used to believe I have to do great things in order to be great.
Yeah.
And I'm learning it's the opposite, actually, that I have to be great in order to do great things. Because what does that mean to be great? Like, how do I be great if I'm not doing great things?
Yeah.
Right? And so it's exactly the work that you and I do, right? It's this knowing, it's this believing, and it's building of a belief and a trust in ourselves and our capability as people.
Right.
And it's connecting with something bigger than us. It's connecting with what we feel drawn to, and having the courage to step into that. And so for me, a big part of being great is courage. And it's because it's that courage that allows us to step into the shame, for example. You talked about shining a light on shame and shining love on shame. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, I need help doing that. That's my experience. And so it's not something that I can do on my own. But in order to do that, I have to be willing to share it with somebody else. Yes. And that takes courage. It's scary, right? Sharing this thing that I'm most ashamed about, that I most want to hide, to actually tell that to somebody else. It's scary and dramatically healing.
Yes, dramatically healing. I completely agree. It's because I find that when we're able to do that, in other words, I'm gonna do this brave thing. We don't call it brave in our head. I'm gonna do this thing that feels so scary. It may be that DEFCON 1, right? In terms of our paradigm, saying, I'm going to die if I do this.
Right.
And of course, you and I know that it does mean the death of that thought. Right? In order for us to move forward, the old thoughts have to die. But those old thoughts are fighting for life. And they're like, no, Rusty, you will look less than, don't be a man. Hey, that saying is, it's so, toxic. But I teach this to my students at the university I teach at. Whenever I can, we bring that into the conversation in terms of socially constructed norms. I used to teach a class on gender, and the whole idea that little baby boys from a young age are like, be a man. Don't cry, be a man. That whole, stuff it in. And so even just the fact that you have emotions on some level, for some, maybe not you, but for some men, it's like, emotions, stoic. There's that stoic, kind of privileging.
Yeah. So I'm a member of an organization called the Mankind Project, and I was first exposed to that in 2013.
Can you one more time? The Mankind Project.
Mankind Project. Yeah.
Nice.
And I can't speak any kind of official language about it, but I will say that it's all about expanding what it means to be a man. That's my experience. And it is, they have a weekend retreat, which is just so powerful, because it's about expanding this idea of, like what you just said, be a man. I just even just hearing that, I cringe, because of course being a man is being strong and courageous and stoic at times. Mm-hmm. But it's also being afraid and vulnerable and needing help. All of those things are also being a man. It's being human, right? We all have those aspects and traits to ourselves. And to open up my repertoire to those things where I was not open to those in the past, and I've learned to be more open to the full part of me. Even the parts of me that are afraid or ashamed or vulnerable or needing help, because I need help at times.
Yes.
And so to open myself up to that has been so liberating and defined. And so for me, when I think about radical love, that's what I think about. And when I did this retreat, this Mankind Project retreat, I experienced that maybe for the first time in my life, having shared just one or two little things that were felt shameful for me. And just to have that held and embraced in a sense of acceptance, radical acceptance, which I think is very much like radical love.
Yes.
It was just kind of blew up my mind a little bit, like, wow, this can actually happen. I can have this kind of experience.
Yes.
And so it's just like that. And I want more of that in my life. Like, I love that. I love that feeling.
That's so powerful. I love that so much. And gosh, transformative, because that is what happens, I believe, when we shine that light of radical love. So radical being, it's an upheaval of the current system. So it's an upheaval of the belief that I got to keep things in and have shame, and to be a man is only one thing, not the other, the latter that you talked about, the being vulnerable and the asking for help. But when you open yourself up to, I'm going to just go for it and share these things, I love that, because I think that's a prime example of what happens, that there's an alchemy that we create. So it went from this lesser idea of shame, I have these things, to, oh my gosh, freedom. There's an alchemy that our awareness expands to the infinite power within us through that accepting, and in whatever ways that looks for us. It's going to be, I'm not saying everybody should go out and tell everybody everything in this moment, but this was Rusty's journey. And I've had this experience too, but we are individually the greatest and highest authority is us. It's always going to be us. So for you, it was to take this journey and to open up, and then that alchemy that happened where, it sounds like you felt empowered, releasing that and knowing yourself in a greater way. And again, knowing that you have that connection to infinite power, infinite intelligence, and infinite love.
Right.
And what an amazing example you're setting for your son.
Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. By all that brave action and that bold action and doing it afraid. I mean, yeah, I can just see how your son and feel how your son is just, I think, on a different trajectory than, maybe you were, or, guys of my age, or, you know what I mean? And that just like it's going to be a different experience.
Right.
And, he's going to know he can love himself exactly as he is, because Dad, Papa's doing it. Right. Yeah. That old adage of, it's not so much what we say, but how we do, and how, and that's being communicated to him every day.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I think for men, our fathers are so formative, and how our fathers are. And it's just, whether we like our dads or don't like our dads, we judge them to be good or bad or whatever it is, it's formative. It's just has a huge impact on us. And I'm sure it's the same as women. It's just being a man, I can talk to that. And so, I think it's so important.
It's I absolutely agree. And by no means to try, because thankfully you and I both know this is not about blame. So we know we're coming from the awareness that our parents did absolutely the best they could with what they had, whatever that looked like. And whether that means we had the quote unquote, great, wonderful, easy childhood, or we had those dang rigorous opportunities that if we could have chosen things to be different, we would have. And yet knowing that we are greater because of that experience. And so it's not about the judgment, but about the awareness of, where you're coming from, that greater awareness, and being able to, because I will have, not only do I have, of course, the coaching company, but I teach at a university, and I will have groups come in like the Blues Project and talking about depression and suicide prevention. And the startling fact that I learned, I think the age range is like between maybe 20 and 25. It's either 20, 25 or 25 and 30, but somewhere the age range for the highest number of people who take their lives are young men in that age range. Young men. So, and I think that's because if you're coming from the idea that you can't talk about your feelings, you can't be vulnerable, you sure as heck don't ask for help, then what do you do? Right. So
Yeah.
I'm, and trying to bring that awareness that asking for help is a sign of strength. A funny story is John and I, my husband and I were watching The Matrix again the other day. Are you a fan of The Matrix?
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, it's like 20 years, bro. I don't even know how that's a thing, but 20 years have passed, and somehow it was like on Netflix, it just like scanned. I was like, The Matrix, should we? And we were just like needed a break from all the grading and the finals of semester, and like, let's do it. And it was really cool how well it's, it stood the test of time in terms of the CGI, but reflecting on how different things were 20 years ago to now. And I remember in the moment, and I told this to my husband, in the moment, that pivotal scene where Neo is like, he discovers his power, he's being shot at, and then he starts to just move like them and like lean back and all of that. But then he turns to Trinity and he says, Trinity, help. And I remember in the movie being like, what? I thought he was going to say, Trinity, run. But he said, Trinity, help. And it was such an impact on me because that's not usually what you see in the films. You don't see the man asking for help, much less from the woman, right? But I just remember thinking how cool that was, that he, this powerful one, the one, was asking her for help. I don't know, that just came to me. I just love that. I think that's so powerful.
I think, yeah, it is powerful. Thank you for highlighting that. And surprising too, actually, when you said that. I was surprised.
You were?
I was. I don't remember that scene from the movie, but I was surprised. Just as you said, it seems to me that in the movies these days that wouldn't happen, right? And so it's part of how we portray and how we create this image. But life isn't like that. There's no one in life that doesn't ask for help, that doesn't need help at times, right? Yep. Even the people that we look up to, whoever that might be, as whatever, as leaders or as really enlightened, spiritual or advanced people, everybody needs help.
Yes.
We're in this journey of life together, and we can only do it together.
Only do it together. I love that. I remember how pivotal that was in the moment, and even now, 20 years later, just reveling and getting to share that with my husband, who, like you, is masculine and feminine, right? He can be stoic and he can be, the masculine, but he can also be, thankfully, and I don't think I'd be with him if he couldn't, but the feminine side, the emotional side, the one who asked, like Neo, for help from me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I asked for help from him all the time, right? Yeah. And we have that partnership, and then speaking, as you did about our fathers, I'm really fortunate. My history with my dad is, super masculine. Like, I think I shared this with Adelina on the first podcast, but working in the pineapple fields and the sugarcane fields and like the kind of labor, sabadong is what it was called. And, with like these two huge, they were like scuba tanks on his back, one for like the air and one for the pesticide. This was a long time ago, obviously, but in the day, and this was what he was doing as a kid, like, not even, I think, high school or younger, so, and then he was in the military, like your friend, and he, did these masculine jobs, but then he would come home and be so gentle and so loving. And I always saw my papa cry at movies. He would be moved and he would never like, oh, don't look at me. It was like, daddy's crying because daddy's sensitive, and isn't that wonderful? And that became my role model. Somebody who can be both, who's not afraid to have emotions. And now I have a husband.
Yeah. So you just used the word sensitive, and it's something that I'm learning to actually embrace about myself. For a long time, I actually saw sensitive as a negative thing, like, oh, don't be so sensitive, like it's a bad thing.
Right.
But I think the sensitivity, I've heard this other way of describing it as sensitive as being more. It's like I'm more receptive to life and to all of the different aspects of life. And so, yes, there are certain things I cry in movies, but I'm starting to embrace the sensitivity. It's like, well, I can see in other people or connect with other people in a way that maybe some other people can't. because they don't have that same sensitivity that I do. And so it's actually, I'm starting to see it more as a gift, but for a long time I did see it as a liability. I think culturally somehow that's not rewarded, at least in men, but I'm starting to value it more. And I think that's if I tie this back into this idea of radical love, there's this, that's where some of that comes from, is just accepting in myself that I'm a different person than my neighbor or than my coworker or my boss or my dad or my brother or whoever, right? I'm a different person, and each person has their own unique set of skills and strengths and values and purpose in the world. And so starting to find some acceptance in that is one step. But then the second step, and for me, this is huge, is courage to actually step into that. Because I think there's so many people out there, and I talk to a lot of people, right? In my business as a coach, I talk to a lot of people who have discomfort in their life, right? They're not happy with some part of their life. And decent number of those people don't do anything about it. And it's scary. Of course it is. It's scary, right? You said there's always a part of us that's holding us back. Yes. My friend was talking about crabs. And if you apparently fishermen, when they're catching crabs, when they put the first crab in a bucket, they have to put a lid over the top of the bucket, because otherwise the crab will crawl out.
Yeah.
But once there's at least 2 crabs in the bucket and more, they don't need a lid anymore, because if one of the crabs tries to crawl out, the other ones will grab it and pull it back down. Wow. And so it's like they've actually documented this, right? And you can see crabs pulling themselves back down. And it's the same idea that we have in us, right? There's a part of us trying to get out of the bucket saying, I don't like what's going on in my life. But there's other parts of us pulling us back down saying, no, stay here, wait for something to change, tough it out, whatever all those messages are. Yes. And it takes a lot of courage to say, no, I'm getting out of that bucket.
Yep. Exactly. It's like there's somehow the crabs are communicating, you don't know what's outside of that bucket. Exactly. At least we know what's here. We know it's here. It looks like it's so safe. It's okay.
Right.
Soon it's going to be stagnant and be stinky water, but we don't know that. We just know, let's just stay here. You don't know what's out there. Mm-hmm. And I had this quote on my website, and I believe to be the truth. It's exactly what you said. It's that what did I write? Something like, taking action towards your vision requires all the courage in your heart. If it were easy, everybody would do it. Mm-hmm. It's just all the courage in your heart to take that brave action, to go after your dream, to go after your vision, because there is, even if, the paradigms that are crabs pulling us back down, the status quo, even if it's so interesting, and you and I both know this as we work with our clients and ourselves in our lives, but because even if it's uncomfortable, even if we don't like it, there is a level of comfort there because we know it. The status quo, there's a part of us that wants to change, but, maybe this is not too bad. And we can convince ourselves, it's not that bad. Or the really toxic paradigm, or I should say, insidious, seductive paradigm that says, well, this bucket isn't so bad. I should be grateful for the bucket I'm in. Other people don't have a bucket, right? Or so, that whole, like, I shouldn't ask for more because life is pretty good. But they know there's that part of them that just wants to go out, but they're like, no, and they talk themselves out of it.
So that is so familiar to me, because I described taking a lower level job at Apple. And so being off of the fast track, once I made that change in about 2010, I was in that job until I left Apple. Same job. So 9 years roughly. And in many ways it was a good thing, but I also described feeling ashamed of it, right? And not even wanting to talk about it. And so it was this, I think I was coming from this place of, I can't have it all. But I'm sure as you hear me telling this, you hear the part of me that was looking outside of myself for the answer, right? That's looking to say, well, what do I see out there in the world that's going to give me what I want? And the work that we do is about starting inside, starting with ourselves. And it wasn't until I asked myself, what do I actually want to do?
Mhm.
If I were to craft a picture of my life, what would I love that I found this path of growth as a coach, and that I could both apply with myself and support others in that journey. And the answer was with me.
It's with you all along. And you had set a precedence in your life, I think. I believe you set this precedence in your life of taking the proverbial road less traveled. So, and building up that resilience in terms of, I'm doing what my, my intuition says, or my gut, or my still small voice, or as Mahatma Gandhi called the voice for truth, that one that said, not this way, this way, that quiet, instead of the megaphone voice. It's like, stay in the rat race or whatever, stay in an apple. And then it was like, this is the way. And because I believe you'd set that precedent and you kept doing that from time with baby, with your son, to that, I almost want to call it something else than that radical love switch in your career versus calling it a demotion, right? Because
right.
It opened everything up for you, right? And time with your son and navigating, all that you had to navigate with regard to a multi-year divorce and all of that, and coming through that, and then coming to the point where then your intuition said, and now it's time for me to leave at the level of facts and circumstances what seems like the safe bet.
Oh yeah. And let me tell you, the paradigms or the crabs or whatever were trying to keep me in that bucket. Even at the week before I was leaving, I heard those voices say, it would really probably make more sense to stay in your job at Apple. Right. And so I had those voices for sure. I said, no, I know what I want to do. I'm ready to do it. Yeah. And was able to make the choice based on the part of me that knew what the right direction was.
Yes.
And so I have done that a number of times in my life. And that was another example. But I just think it's so important to acknowledge, I don't do that in the absence of all of those voices. I do it in the presence of all of those voices.
Oh, yes. You and I, we've trained ourselves to know the difference between that voice, that paradigm voice that is always going to be louder. It's going to be fearful. It will sound like it'll make sense. It's going to sound logical, but it's not that quiet voice that says, not that way, it's this way. It's that it really is a still small voice. And it takes, again, I believe, all the courage. It probably took all the courage in your heart to do that brave thing and say, I'm ready. And the beautiful thing is, that's what all the greatest stories in the world and most successful people in the world, they've all done that from the big, from Apple, the company Apple starting, right? The founders, and they were doing this thing that people thought was crazy, and to everybody from Oprah to just any of those who have achieved great success. They did the thing that felt, I would imagine, just terrifying at some level, right? But trusted and knowing. And the beautiful thing is, it's already occurred for you in your business, is that the universe rushed in to support you and your business.
Yeah. And I just, I want to go back to this idea that it's so hard to do it alone. And I really don't think you can. Yeah. And so to have that community, to have a guide or a mentor or a coach or somebody that's supporting you in the process, and a community, right? I like, for me, I need all of it. I need all the different pieces there, because it's so easy to go backwards, and we all do, right? It's like we all pick up those old habits, or we all listen to that old voice for a period of time until we realize, oh gosh, now I see what I'm doing. Like, that's not the way I want to be, and we can change it at that point. But that I just think, for me, the health is so important.
Absolutely, it's the foundation, right? And I think it's like as our mentor Mary Morrissey talks about her mentor Jack Boland, when she was newer to these principles, these success principles, the art and science of transformation, and she'd say, Jack, I can't do that. It's going to take 10 years for you to do X, Y, and Z. And he said, hold on. You want to squeeze the infinite into this amount of time? What if it could take less? Could you be open to that? Well, and he was like, okay, do you believe that I believe it's possible? well, yeah, I believe that you believe, then hold on to my belief. So as you're saying, it's so, I think, necessary to have somebody who believes in us when we're still learning to believe in ourselves. So as coaches, we are now able to do that for our clients, and we still do the thing that we sort of like, the adage of we practice what we preach. We still stay with our mentor, somebody who is further along the path.
Right.
And as we know, it's difficult to see the picture when you're in the frame. Right? So we provide that for our clients, and we have that for ourselves through the community, through masterminding partners, in the way that we are. And then of course a mentor and that structure of support. And then the beautiful thing that happens in that way, in that time-space repetition, is that time collapses versus, maybe we could do things on our own, but they generally take so much longer and it can be harder. But with coaching and that structure of support, it's so, it's just so much easier in so many ways. Still scary, but at least we move forward. We're moving in that forwardly direction and radically loving ourselves right where we are, and having these tools to, again, right, the saying of some people will, oh gosh, what is it? Be safe and then get safely to their deathbed, right? Remember that one of just they're doing everything safe and they're going to safely get to their deathbed, versus they haven't really lived. They haven't really, life is ever seeking that freer, fuller expansiveness as expressed through us, as expressed through them. And if they're not doing it.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to share with my clients and with other people that I talk to is just a very simple tool that I use, which just you reminded me of it when you were just talking about that, is you can live safely until you get to your deathbed. And so, for me, when I was thinking about leaving Apple, and it was the week before, and my boss asked me, do you want to stay? And there's a part of me that says, yes, yes, yes. And there's a part of me that knows, no, I'm ready to go make this my new life and go coach people full time. And so when I'm sitting in the frame, as you said, when I'm in that frame, when I'm in that picture, it can be very, it's hard for me to get a perspective, and I can lose clarity on what the right path is. And so just the simple thing that I like to do is put myself 20 years in the future, 40 years in the future, whatever, age 70 or 80, looking backwards on life and say, which choice feels right from that experienced, knowledgeable, wise perspective of those additional years of my life and looking back on life. And for this decision about leaving Apple, it was so obvious from that perspective. It's go, take the risk, right? I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it goes great. Maybe I fall on my face. But either way, what an experience.
Yes. And just the fact that you have that foundation, that you're coming from the belief of either way, what an experience. Because most people would have gone, either way, forget it. Either way, no, either way, I take safe. Safe, please. Party of one, safe. Versus, daring to, as you said, to be courageous and to listen to your intuition, your voice for truth. And, gosh, so brave and looking at 20 years ahead, and which is the one is really going to serve me more. And having radical love, I would imagine, right? Because part of you probably is kind of got, okay, well, maybe if I'm staring down the dark, what if this doesn't work out, right? And then perhaps you're coming from the belief, I'm going to love myself anyway, right? Having radical love for either path. That's not what is occurring, but, the power move is to, okay, I'm going to be okay no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think for me, radical love comes in there's two pieces of that. One is just holding this belief that it will all work out.
Yes.
And that can be hard for me to hold on my own. And so that's when I talk about support, that support is so important for me, because sometimes I don't hold that belief, or I'm shaky in that, and to have others around me who can support me in knowing in their deep heart conviction, like it will work out.
Yep.
No hesitation. And that's invaluable to me. And so for me, that is a form of radical love. Yes. It's not just that support and acceptance of and belief that it will work out.
Yeah, exactly. It's there's only one thing happening here, and it's infinite intelligence. And I am being led to my best and highest good, and I don't know what that looks like, but I know that the content of my life, as Mary Morrissey says, is the curriculum of my evolution. So whatever is occurring is for me to evolve. And yes, I'm taking these steps, and it is leading to X, Y, and Z. And also it's who I become in the process. It's who Rusty is becoming in the process from taking this bold move that if we were to poll people, if I were to just do a survey at school and say, all right, let's say you have a job at Apple and then it's secure and you've been there for, this many years and you're good and you got a community and then you want to go do this dream, which would you do? What 95% would probably be like, nah, I'm good. I think I'm good. It's okay.
Right. And I relate to that because that was me for a lot of years. That was me. And so I think that's why I'm such a believer and such a proponent of this work that we do. Is it was through this work that I went from that 95% saying, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to stay in the stable job. I'm going to buckle down. Yes, there's a part of me it feels like there's something missing, but that doesn't matter. I'm just going to ignore that. Right. So I was firmly in that camp. And it's through this work that I built the belief and the courage and the tools to know how to step forward. Yes. And to step forward more fully. And it's all about who we become in the process. Even back from the decision to take time off when my son was born, to shift to a job where I had more flexibility, all of those things, those are all decisions, but they all lead to this place.
Exactly. Rusty knowing himself in a way that he couldn't have if he hadn't made those brave, bold decisions. And the universe rushed in support you then, and it's supporting you now. And then through this, you're getting to serve so many other beautiful souls.
Right.
That they wouldn't have been able to be served had you not been brave in that action that you took just last year. Yeah. It's powerful, my friend. It's so powerful. So this has been amazing. Gosh, just as I knew it would be, another heartfelt, powerful conversation. Do you have any final thoughts as we bring this to a landing with regard to anything we've talked about, radical love or?
Yeah, I'd like to share a couple of things. One is the idea that radical love can be for men too.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. And even the word, even for me, the word, I will tell you just totally honestly, like the word radical love, it has a little bit of a feminine vibe to it. And so for me, even it feels a little uncomfortable, but I think it's like finding, what does it mean for me at a personal level, as a man? Like, what does that mean? And it's the acceptance, and it's the full spectrum of courage and fear and stoicism and shame. And it's just the whole thing is just being open to the whole of experience of what it means to be a person, a man, or a woman in this world. And so that's the first thing. I just want to say that I do believe this idea of radical love or acceptance or being your full self fully applies to men. And I think it's so valuable. It's been incredibly valuable in my life. And I've had a good life. And the richness that I experience in my life and the joy and the freedom I have in my life now, having gone through these things that we've talked about today, is even better than where I was before I did all of this. Yeah. And it comes from this idea of radical love and acceptance and expressing myself. And so I just think that's so important. And I also want to say that I see radical love both as a healer, but also as a catalyst for growth. Yes. And it can really be, and it really is both. And both are important, because for those of us who've been through difficult situations in life, and we didn't really talk about that today, but that sense of radical love is very healing. And as a catalyst, it gives us a platform, right? I mean, even you hear the stories about little toddlers who look at their parent and, then they run off like maybe around the corner. And then they come back as like, that's a big adventure for them. But they still have that sense of love and connection and safety because their parent is there and waiting for them and celebrating with them and all of that. And so in that way, I think we, like, even as an adult, we want the same thing. We want to know that we have a safe place to come back to.
Yes.
And so that sense of radical love is like, yes, go venture out, have courage, take that step, go for it. And there's a safe place for you and you're going to be fine when you do it.
Yes. And that safe place is within us.
Mm-hmm.
Safe. And I love that. Yes, we want to surround ourselves with that community that supports us, but knowing that safe place is within us. And I love that you said it heals and it's a catalyst. It's both healing and a catalyst of radical love, because I think it's true. That's the whole idea, is that how do we move forward and take that brave action if we're stuck in shame or we're stuck in unforgiveness, right? And all that you navigated, and anybody who's had a heartbreak, but then divorce and having a child, and freeing ourselves from the shackles of bondage if we're not letting go and love instead of loving what is, so that we can then be propelled forward into this rich, beautiful life through radical love for what was, what is, and ourselves. And then again, that elevation of the awareness of who we really are, that we're all these powerful beings. Yeah. We get to remember that. And thank you for really being transparent with regard to even the name radical love, that you're finding it to be kind of feminine, which is fascinating to me, because I'm thinking the word radical is still used in some contexts, in terms of like deviant, those radicals, right? Even though that it's not what it is, that's one component, but radical is that upheaval of the current system, and that you're finding it to be feminine. That's fascinating. I love that. I learned something new. And that even though you found it to be feminine, you had radical love for the name radical love.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. That's so beautiful, my friend. Also, that's poignant. I want to make sure everybody knows how you can contact Rusty. Rusty, you can contact him at www.svdreambuilders.com. That's www.svdream, D-R-E-A-M, builders, BUILDERS.com. Rusty Gaillard. And you've got a couple webinars coming up that everybody can learn more about, June 5th as well as June 17th.
Yes.
Find that info there on his website, as well as, of course, Rusty's always talking with people and helping people and coaching people. So definitely look into that as well, because you want to feel the power of this magnificent man who is Rusty and is open-hearted and powerful and can absolutely help you transform your life. And it's been such a gift to be able to have this conversation with you, my friend. So thank you.
And thank you, Corey. As I said at the beginning, it's just, I think it's a real gift that you have these conversations and share them with the world. And it's been a real pleasure to talk to you and to connect with you. And I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Me too. I knew it would be powerful, and it was, and it's such an honor and a gift. So feel a great big hug from me, Rusty. And for everybody listening, as always, I hope that you love big. I hope that you be brave, and I hope that you share your beautiful, beautiful light with the world. Bye for now. Ahui ho. Bye.